Yo, yo, yo. Yo, yo, yo. Yo, yo, yo. It's the non-believable Bibble Klibble. Welcome back. What are you doing back? You came back. Why do you keep coming back? Well, I got more things to say, so we're just going to keep on going, eh? I was thinking about what to do for our intro for today, and I realized that we sort of skipped past a very well-known part of the Bible. Now, people may not be aware of Genesis 31:41, and it came to pass, whensoever the stronger cattle did conceive, that Jacob laid the rods before the eyes of the cattle in the gutters, that they might conceive among the rods. Yeah, that one's different. That part of the Bible is a little different. But people do know Exodus 22:18. Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live. This gem is buried in the middle of laws, not witchcraft laws, boring, dry laws. Laws about personal responsibility in accidents, like when your ox runs over somebody, or you dig a hole and somebody else's ox runs into the hole after running into somebody. Whose fault is it? That's what we're talking about at the time, and then out of nowhere, thou shalt not suffer a witch to live. There are people who have never even opened a Bible, but they know those words. Why is it so popular? Where did they come from? But most of all, what do the words mean? The answer will take us on a journey through the history of the Hebrew language, through attempts to translate it by several different societies. It's a big ol' mess. Let's get started. I found a lot of useful information on Elizabeth Sloan's article, Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live, a murderous mistranslation, published in Haaretz, an Israeli newspaper, actually the longest running Israeli newspaper. Anyway, according to the article, the original Hebrew of the word that was translated into English as witch is mekhashepa. The word mekhashepa is translated to witch in the Ben Yehuda Hebrew Dictionary. I always get into this for a simple reason, and then before I know it, I'm researching the revival of the Hebrew language in the modern era. Well, Eliezer ben Yehuda is recognized as the driving force behind the revival of the Hebrew language in the modern era. This is actually a phenomenally interesting story, but I'll give you the spark notes. Ever since that pesky destruction of the Second Temple by the Romans in about 70 AD, Hebrew as a language had a pretty hard time, understandably knowing little to nothing about Jewish culture from up until about last year. I discovered that until the 19th century, Hebrew as a spoken language was basically non-existent. In the years following the destruction of the Second Temple, Hebrew was kept alive mainly in writing through the use of biblical Hebrew in religious scriptures. So in this way, it was kept alive not through speech, but in writing in an archaic form of this language. But it was able to survive until the 2nd century AD, the Mishnaic Hebrew phase. Jewish scholars wrote Hebrew in secret, both as a form of revolt, as well as to preserve traditions that they saw being in danger of being lost. And the funny thing was that even after all of this work, a millennia later, the language almost was lost, at least in relevance. As we get closer to our era, after centuries of persecution, diaspora, you have Jewish communities living all over the world. Jews speaking German, French, Russian, Yiddish, which was a huge obstacle, as Zionism brought the ideas that Jews should have one language and one homeland. It became increasingly difficult to figure out what language. If you think Hebrew was an obvious first choice, it wasn't. Yiddish was really the primary language for a lot of Jewish communities. Eventually, Israel would try to distance itself from this language as a language of the diaspora, with Hebrew being a return to their roots. Of course, once this idea was popular and accepted, you still had a country filled with people who did not speak the country's established language. Getting to this point in itself was a miracle. Being able to champion the Hebrew language and most importantly, bring it back to the modern day are accomplishments largely attributed to Eliezer ben Yehuda. Famously, he was so stubborn and so obsessed with the Hebrew language that he raised his son only speaking Hebrew. This son, Ben Zion, therefore became the first native speaker of modern Hebrew. His father contributed over 150 new words to modern Hebrew. You have to understand that this is a language that nobody has been speaking at that point for almost 2,000 years, kept alive by medieval sects until the Enlightenment, when everybody was language crazy. People were learning Latin and Greek, and some saw Hebrew as sort of a classical language because of its relationship to the Bible, to the ancient world. As a matter of fact, Alexander Hamilton and James Madison were both well versed in Hebrew. And now the last step, using this language not for religious purposes, but for social purposes. Words had to be invented by necessity if the language was going to work in the modern day. At one point, Theodor Herzl, one of the main founders of the Zionist movement himself, said, "Who knows enough Hebrew to buy a train ticket?" He was in favor of making German the national language of Israel. And now, modern Hebrew has a word for ice cream. That kept coming up a lot. I think they're really proud of it. As a matter of fact, it's glida. I like that. Anyway, this is all to say that in a language that was only recently resurrected, that had been known only through religious texts written by a culture of people perpetually on the run, there may be room for interpretation. So, Ben Yehuda, the father of modern Hebrew, in the Ben Yehuda Hebrew Dictionary, translates Mekhashepa as witch. Now, etymologically, this would seem to make sense. The root of Mekhashepa is kashap, which can be translated to mean mutterings, such as one who practices magic by using occult formulas, incantations, and mystic mutterings. However, quoting from Elizabeth Sloan's article, Kenneth Kitchen, wow, there's a guy named Kenneth Kitchen on planet Earth. Kenneth Kitchen, a Bible scholar at the University of Liverpool, translates the root as to cut and thinks it might refer to cutting herbs. This idea is further encouraged by the Septuagint translation, pharmakeia, translated by Ann Jeffers, a lecturer in biblical studies at Heythrop College, as herbalist. Perhaps we're seeing a return of the green herb. Skip on over to the 4th century, late 4th century, when Jerome of Stridon translates what will become the Vulgate, or Common Bible, the People's Bible, which by the Council of Trent, held in the 14th century, would become the official Latin translation of the Bible for Western Christianity. And in the Vulgate, Mekhashepa is translated as maleficos, definitively evildoer. This gave an impression of evil, witchcraft, and devilry, which, according to that translation, should be met with death. And yet, in the 16th century, Reginald Scott, author of The Discovery of Witchcraft in 1584, a book intended to encourage skepticism about witchcraft, he refers to the Septuagint translation as evidence that the word witch is not an accurate translation, instead suggesting the word was meant to refer to poisoners. Unfortunately, the translation had already done its work. And when you look at this passage in relation to other passages in the Bible about witchcraft, Leviticus 19:26, "Ye shall not use enchantments nor observe times." Deuteronomy 18:10-11, "There shall not be found among you any that useth divination, or an observer of times, or an enchanter, or a witch, or a charmer, or a consulter with familiar spirits, or a wizard, or a necromancer." You start to understand the culture against the unexplainable, against magic and divination that is being encouraged by that translation. Language is a funny thing. On one side, you get glida, and on the other side, you have thou shalt not suffer a witch to live. If the original intent was to warn against poisoners, that meaning has not been conveyed. But the first modern dictionary for the Hebrew language was released in 1959. This is a language and a tradition that overwhelms us. In the end, I think it's a good sign, and maybe a sign of our times, that people are more interested in studying a language and even inventing new words than mistranslating old ones. So, that said, sit back, grab a nice bowl of glida, and join with me as I try not to badly translate Moses' continuing journeys with the Israelites. Chapter 24. And he said unto Moses, Come up unto the Lord, thou and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel, and worship ye afar off. And Moses alone shall come near the Lord, but they shall not come nigh, neither shall the people go up with him. And Moses came and told the people all the words of the Lord, and all the judgments. And all the people answered with one voice, and said, All the words which the Lord hath said will we do. And Moses wrote all the words of the Lord, and rose up early in the morning, and builded an altar under the hill, and 12 pillars according to the 12 tribes of Israel. And he sent young men of the children of Israel, which offered burnt offerings, and sacrificed peace offerings of oxen unto the Lord. And Moses took half of the blood, and put it in basins, and half of the blood he sprinkled on the altar. And he took the book of the covenant, and read in the audience of the people, and they said, All that the Lord hath said will we do, and be obedient. And Moses took the blood, and sprinkled it on the people, and said, Behold the blood of the covenant, which the Lord hath made with you concerning all these words. So it's interesting to see these laws, the book of the covenant, being mentioned. So God has conferred these laws unto Moses, and at this point he's definitely written them down. And then also this ritual with the blood, clearly always referencing back to Genesis, the blood laws. When you consider the ritual of sacrificing an animal, offering up its blood, this practice is clearly important, clearly still being done. I find it interesting, the Christian idea that Christ dying on the cross, that blood, thenceforth, makes the necessity of spilling sacrificial blood obsolete. Jesus is the sacrifice. God hath provideth the lamb to be slain instead of Isaac. So anyway, it's interesting to see a time before that, when these kinds of blood rituals were definitely still necessary. Actually, come to think of it, that is the Christian idea, but does that mean that Jewish people are still required to sacrifice animals? Okay, according to the internet, with the destruction of the Second Temple, animal sacrifices were no longer allowed. According to sacred Jewish law, the temple is the only place allowed for sacrifices. Today, modern Jews give charity or pray. Although, when the Messiah comes and a third temple is built, Orthodox Judaism says animal sacrifices are back on the menu. Okay, continuing on. Verse 9. Then went up Moses and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel. And they saw the God of Israel. Whoa. And there was under his feet, as it were, a paved work of a sapphire stone, and as it were, the body of heaven in his clearness. Well, I'm going to be looking up that in a second. And upon the nobles of the children of Israel he laid not his hand. Also they saw God, and did eat and drink. And the Lord said unto Moses, While we're hanging, come up to me into the mount, and be there, and I will give thee tables of stone, and a law, and commandments which I have written, that thou mayest teach them. And Moses rose up, and his minister Joshua, and Moses went up into the mount of God. And he said unto the elders, Tarry ye here for us, until we come again unto you. And behold, Aaron and Hur are with you. If any man have any matters to do, let him come unto them. And Moses went up into the mount, and a cloud covered the mount. And the glory of the Lord abode upon Mount Sinai, and the cloud covered it 6 days. And the 7th day he called unto Moses out of the midst of the cloud. And the sight of the glory of the Lord was like devouring fire on the top of the mount in the eyes of the children of Israel. And Moses went into the midst of the cloud, and gat him up into the mount. And Moses was in the mount 40 days and 40 nights. That's crazy. That's awesome. Like, imagine 40 days of one-on-one conversation with God. So Moses is getting his light straight from the source. We're going to leave him there, and I'll read you another translation of that previous verse. Exodus 24:10. And they saw the God of Israel. Under his feet was something like a pavement made of lapis lazuli, as bright blue as the sky. So, God has feet. So he's appearing to them in some kind of human feet form. Or he's just feet. He's unknowable. So I don't know. I can't tell you. So we have God's feet, and then a beautiful, polished blue stone pavement leading right up to him. Great presentation. Now, the other thing to mention, Moses is going to receive tables of stone, upon which we can assume are the laws and the 10 commandments. But God already gave Moses the 10 commandments, right? Apparently not, according to Ellicott's Commentary for English Readers. Quote, the great work still remained to be done. A series of laws had been laid down for the nation and accepted with unanimity, but a larger share must be assigned to the ritual and ceremonial, which Moses was now instructed to set up, and which forms the main subject of the remainder of the book. And then, referring to, and I will give thee tables of stone. It is remarkable that these are not expressly said, either here or in Exodus 31:18, to have contained the 10 commandments. The fact, however, is distinctly stated in Deuteronomy 5:22, and with respect to the second tables, the same is affirmed in Exodus 34:28. The fiction of a double decalogue is thus precluded. Decalogue coming from the Greek deca, 10, logos, word, decalogue, the 10 commandments. So, Moses is going to the mountain to get stoned. To get the stones. He's left Aaron and Hur in charge, and he's going to be high up with God for 40 days and 40 nights. What could possibly go wrong? Chapter 25. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, that they bring me an offering of every man that giveth it willingly. With his heart ye shall take my offering. And this is the offering which ye shall take of them, gold and silver and brass, and blue and purple and scarlet, and fine linen and goat's hair, and rams' skins dyed red, and badgers' skins, and shittim wood, oil for the light, spices for anointing oil, and for sweet incense, onyx stones, and stones to be set in the ephod and in the breastplate. An ephod is in ancient Israel, a sleeveless garment worn by Jewish priests. So basically he's telling the priests how the crew's gotta look. Gotta have onyx stones. Gotta look fresh. Verse 8, and let them make me a sanctuary, that I may dwell among them. Ooh, this is the tabernacle. According to all that I shew thee, after the pattern of the tabernacle. Yeah. See, I know things. And the pattern of all the instruments thereof, even so shall ye make it. And they shall make an ark of shittim wood. 2 cubits and a half shall be the length thereof, and 1 cubit and a half the breadth thereof. The breadth thereof. That's the hardest TH. And they shall make an ark of shittim wood, 2 cubits and a half shall be the length thereof, and 1 cubit and a half the breadth thereof, and 1 cubit and a half the height thereof. And thou shalt overlay it with pure gold. The ark's looking good. Within and without shalt thou overlay it, and shalt make upon it a crown of gold round about. And thou shalt cast 4 rings of gold for it, and put them in the 4 corners thereof, and 2 rings shall be in the one side of it, and 2 rings in the other side of it. And thou shalt make staves of shittim wood, and overlay them with gold. And thou shalt put the staves into the rings by the sides of the ark, that the ark may be borne with them. And it's all gold. It's going to look fucking great. And you got to wear onyx, onyx stones, and spices for anointing oil. This is my command. Page turn. The staves shall be in the rings of the ark. They shall not be taken from it. And thou shalt put into the ark the testimony which I shall give thee. And thou shalt make a mercy seat of pure gold. 2 cubits and a half shall be the length thereof, and 1 cubit and a half the breadth thereof. Breadth thereof. And thou shalt make 2 cherubims of gold, of beaten work shalt thou make them, in the 2 ends of the mercy seat. And make 1 cherub on the one end, and the other cherub on the other end. Even of the mercy seat shall ye make the cherubims on the 2 ends thereof. This just sounds like Pimp My Ride. And the cherubims shall stretch forth their wings on high, covering the mercy seat with their wings, and their faces shall look one to another. Toward the mercy seat shall the faces of the cherubims be. And thou shalt put the mercy seat above upon the ark. And in the ark thou shalt put the testimony that I shall give thee. And there I will meet with thee, and I will commune with thee from above the mercy seat, from between the 2 cherubims which are upon the ark of the testimony, of all things which I will give thee in commandment unto the children of Israel. See, this is real cool, because where this is going is that the tabernacle is basically this tent that they have set up. And then inside the tabernacle is a room called the Holy of Holies. I've mentioned this on the Bible Club before. And basically in the Holy of Holies, it's called the Holy of Holies because that's where the ark is kept and where God is literally thought to have hung out. So they'll just be walking around with this ark, with the 10 Commandments inside, in the tabernacle, with God inside. So that's where that is going. Thou shalt also make a table of shittim wood. 2 cubits shall be the length thereof, and 1 cubit the breadth thereof, and 1 cubit and a half the height thereof. And thou shalt overlay it with pure gold, and make thereto a crown of gold round about. Okay, pretty consistent so far. And thou shalt make unto it a border of an hand breadth round about, and thou shalt make a golden crown to the border thereof round about. And thou shalt make for it 4 rings of gold, and put the rings in the 4 corners that are on the 4 feet thereof. Over against the border shall the rings be places of the staves to bear the table. And thou shalt make the staves of, you guessed it, shittim wood. And guess what they're going to do with them? Overlay them with gold, that the table may be borne with them. And thou shalt make the dishes thereof, and spoons thereof, and covers thereof, and bowls thereof, to cover withal. Of pure gold shalt thou make them. And thou shalt set upon the table shewbread before me alway. Shewbread, 12 loaves placed every Sabbath in the Jewish temple and eaten by the priests at the end of the week. So, that's where they got the name for the band. I only heard one song and liked one song from that band. Showbread, and thou shalt make a candlestick of pure gold. Of beaten work shall the candlestick be made. His shaft and his branches, his bowls, his knops, and his flowers shall be of the same. I just like that we have a masculine pronoun on an inanimate object. If God's asking for it, I'm sure there's a reason. And 6 branches shall come out of the sides of it, 3 branches of the candlestick out of the one side, and 3 branches of the candlestick out of the other side. 3 bowls made like unto almonds, with a knop and a flower in one branch, and 3 bowls made like almonds in the other branch, with a knop and a flower. So in the 6 branches that come out of the candlestick. And in the candlestick shall be 4 bowls, made like unto almonds, with their knops and their flowers. And there shall be a knop under 2 branches of the same, and a knop under 2 branches of the same, and a knop under 2 branches of the same, according to the 6 branches that proceed out of the candlestick. Okay. Their knops and their branches shall be of the same, and it shall be one beaten work of pure gold. And thou shalt make the 7 lamps thereof. And they shall light the lamps thereof, that they may give light over against it. And the tongs thereof, and the snuff dishes thereof, shall be of pure gold. Of a talent of pure gold shall he make it with all these vessels. And look that thou make them after their pattern, which was shewed thee in the mount. Wow, which was shewed thee in the mount. So this is what he's spending his time showing Moses, how to make this stuff, how to be a metalsmith, I guess. All right, chapter 26. Moreover, thou shalt make the tabernacle with 10 curtains of fine twined linen. These are all tongue twisters, with 10 curtains of fine twined linen. 10 curtains fine twined linen. And blue and purple and scarlet, with cherubims of cunning work, shalt thou make them. The length of one curtain shall be 28 cubits, and the breadth of one curtain 4 cubits. And every one of the curtains shall have one measure. The 5 curtains shall be coupled together, one to another, and other 5 curtains shall be coupled one to another. And thou shalt make loops of blue upon the edge of the one curtain from the selvage in the coupling, and likewise shalt thou make in the uttermost edge of another curtain in the coupling of the second. 50 loops shalt thou make in the one curtain, and 50 loops shalt thou make in the edge of the curtain that is in the coupling of the second, that the loops may take hold one of another. And thou shalt make 50 taches, Tachès, of gold, and couple the curtains together with the taches. And it shall be one tabernacle. Hooks or clasps by which the tabernacle curtains were connected. Interesting. Side note, makes you wonder, and I'm sure somebody has, and I'm going to have to look for this and then talk about it in the next episode, but somebody has made a tabernacle and an Ark of the Covenant according to these specifications. They had to. And thou shalt make curtains of goat's hair to be a covering upon the tabernacle. 11 curtains shalt thou make. Listen, at this point, I think I can surely say that the rest of this episode is going to be a bunch of laws and instructions for making things. Now, I have to do this. It's my destiny. But you can leave anytime you want. Nobody's keeping you here. But if you do stay, we're going to get into this. I bet you're wondering about the length of one curtain. I'll tell you, the length of one curtain shall be 30 cubits, and the breadth of one curtain 4 cubits, and the 11 curtains shall be all of one measure. And thou shalt couple 5 curtains by themselves, and 6 curtains by themselves, and shalt double the 6th curtain in the forefront of the tabernacle. And thou shalt make 50 loops on the edge of the one curtain that is outmost in the coupling, and 50 loops in the edge of the curtain which coupleth the second. And thou shalt make 50 taches of brass, and put the taches into the loops, and couple the tent together, that it may be one. And the remnant that remaineth of the curtains of the tent, the half curtain that remaineth, shall hang over the backside of the tabernacle. And a cubit on the one side, and a cubit on the other side, of that which remaineth in the length of the curtains of the tent, it shall hang over the sides of the tabernacle, on this side and on that side, to cover it. And thou shalt make a covering for the tent of ram's skins, dyed red, and a covering above of badger's skins. I wonder if there's some kind of hidden esoteric meaning in all these measurements. Again, there has to be, right? This is too dry, and I lack the knowledge at this point to understand. But I'm definitely going to do some research for next episode. And thou shalt make boards for the tabernacle of shittim wood, standing up. 10 cubits shall be the length of a board, and a cubit and a half shall be the breadth of one board. 2 tenons shall there be in one board, set in order one against another. Thus shalt thou make for all the boards of the tabernacle. Okay, so this is cool. A tenon, apparently, is this like little projection of wood, like going out on one side and then it fits into the other one, like Lego pieces. It's called a mortise and tenon. Verse 18, and thou shalt make the boards for the tabernacle, 20 boards on the south side, southward. And thou shalt make 40 sockets of silver under the 20 boards, 2 sockets under one board for his 2 tenons, and 2 sockets under another board for his 2 tenons. And for the second side of the tabernacle on the north side, there shall be 20 boards. And there 40 sockets of silver, 2 sockets under one board, and 2 sockets under another board. And for the sides of the tabernacle westward, thou shalt make 6 boards. And 2 boards shalt thou make for the corners of the tabernacle in the 2 sides. And they shall be coupled together beneath, and they shall be coupled together above the head of it, unto one ring. Thus it shall be for them both. They shall be for the 2 corners. And they shall be 8 boards, and their sockets of silver 16 sockets, 2 sockets under one board, and 2 sockets under another board. And thou shalt make bars of shittim wood, 5 for the boards on the one side of the tabernacle, and 5 bars for the boards of the other side of the tabernacle, and 5 bars for the boards of the side of the tabernacle for the 2 sides westward. You better be building this in your head, or else you're doing it wrong, you have to rewind, you have to go back. And the middle bar in the midst of the boards shall reach from end to end. And thou shalt overlay the boards with gold, and make their rings of gold for places for the bars. And thou shalt overlay the bars with gold. Really waiting to drop that one. Slather that one with gold too. And thou shalt rear up the tabernacle according to the fashion thereof, which was shewed thee in the mount. And thou shalt make a veil of blue, and purple, and scarlet, and fine twined linen of cunning work, with cherubims shall it be made. And it shalt hang upon 4 pillars of shittim wood, overlaid with gold. Their hooks shall be of gold, upon the 4 sockets of silver, switching it up. And thou shalt hang up the veil under the taches, that thou mayest bring in thither within the veil the ark of the testimony. And the veil shall divide unto you between the holy place and the most holy, the holy of holies. And thou shalt put the mercy seat upon the ark of the testimony in the most holy place. And thou shalt set the table without the veil, and the candlestick over against the table on the side of the tabernacle toward the south, on the side of the tabernacle toward the south, and thou shalt put the table on the north side. And thou shalt make an hanging for the door of the tent of blue, and purple, and scarlet, and fine twined linen, wrought with needlework. Cool. And thou shalt make for the hanging 5 pillars of shittim wood, and overlay them with gold, and their hooks shall be of gold, and thou shalt cast 5 sockets of brass for them. Now, they warned me. They all said it was going to be dry. But I didn't think that it would literally be like reading instructions from IKEA to DIY your own Holy of Holies. And I'm for it, and I'll tell you why. This is why I'll almost never get bored reading the Bible. The drier the directions become, the more insistent it becomes that everything be covered in gold, with every specific number of taches and measurements to make boards and hold curtains up together, the more a question starts to form in my mind. Why did this matter to them? To put it another way, if this was written yesterday about, like, let's say George R.R. Martin came out with his new Game of Thrones book, finally, and it's all just a bunch of measurements for the tabernacle. In this universe, obviously, the Bible doesn't exist. I don't know if that makes George R.R. Martin God. Point is, not only would a lot of fans be disappointed, I wouldn't care. That's not interesting to me. What is interesting to me are very specific directions written like 4,000 years ago. What would an ancient person picture as an example of a structure to make? I don't have to ask that question. Here's an example. And here's the second half of it. This may be boring to me or to you, but the presence of these specific measurements in this holy book is because these people believed that these measurements, that this tabernacle was so important that it had to be rendered faithfully and recorded in this work. That said, I'm calling one more episode of this. I'm going to speed read through the rest of it until we get to the good stuff. But till then, this is something that I must do. And if you care to join me, I'll always have something interesting for you to listen to. Until then, thank you for joining me. It has been another episode of the Non-Believer Bible Club. I hope it finds you well. Keep calm and tabernacle on.